In part 3, we will give our tab some human characteristics. I call this anticipating the note in our playing. Part 4 will be concerned with entering rests and correcting our notation as we edit our tab. You will probably want to go over these lessons several times to get all the information. It took me several months to learn this stuff. Our tab is starting to come together now, but it still has a computer or a mechanical sound to it. Every note in our tab is played on the beat. This rarely ever happens in actual playing. This is where what I call anticipated notes come into play. Let's go to measure 22 and examine that measure. In the fourth beat of this measure, we play an E note. If we were to play that just before the beat, it would sound like this. Let's delete this note, go back one space, and let's put it in again. And this is the way it would sound. We have anticipated the E note before the fourth beat. But in doing so, we have really messed up our notation up here. What we want to be able to do is to play this E note and carry it right on through the end of the measure. So we're going to take the fourth beat and we're going to add another 0 to it. And we're going to tie these two together by hitting our tied note in our note palette or by hitting the L on our keyboard. You notice that whenever we have a tied note, such as here in measure 21, in our tablature, this note is put in parentheses. And of course, over here in measure 22, this tied note is put in parentheses. What this actually does is causes this note to carry all the way through, but it doesn't actually play again. It just sounds at a very low volume. Listen and see what I mean. You don't actually hear that E note played the second time. It just allows the first E note to be carried all the way through to the start of the next measure. In anticipating the fourth beat, we have actually turned these two notes into eighth notes. Up until now, we've only used quarter notes as our smallest note. If we're going to anticipate the beat, we're going to be using eighth notes. We have turned this note into an eighth note, and our new note is an eighth note. But this has upset our bass note here, and we need to fix that. The way we're going to fix this is to keep our cursor here on our bass note, and we want our note stem to point downward like it did before. Now you remember when we pointed all of our note stems upward, we used the A key on the keyboard. Now we're going to use the Z key on the keyboard, and when we hit this, you'll notice that the stem will go down again. There, now we've got the stem facing down, but suddenly it's an eighth note. So we have to fix that. We need to go up and turn that back into a quarter note again. And now our notation looks right. Let's listen to this. You hear that anticipated note? Now it's beginning to sound more natural as opposed to a mechanical or a computer sound. Now let's move on to measure 24. In measure 24, we have a quarter note up here. And of course that duration isn't right. We can do two things. We can either take this G note, this D note, and turn it into a whole note, which will let it ring throughout the measure, or we can leave it a quarter note and we could add a couple more notes in here to give it a little flavor. Let's add a couple more notes. Now when we add these two notes, let's anticipate the beat on both of the notes. Instead of letting them ring on the beat, let's put a note just before the third beat, which will be a 0, and then just before the fourth beat on the second string, which will be a 3. Now since these two notes are part of the melody, we're going to want its note stem to be up. So we'll click on that note, hit our A key on the keyboard, and we will move it up. Let's play this and see what it sounds like. Okay, we've got ourselves a couple more anticipated notes.